Good morning, everybody. Welcome to the March meeting of the Children and Families Scrutiny Board. My name is Billy Flynn. I'm the chair of this board. Just to remind you all, the meeting is being webcast so that any members of the public that are interested in the agenda today who can't come here to observe in person can watch us all remotely. As usual, we'll introduce members and guests, starting from the left. Councillor.
Morning, Councillor Jess Annixter, Crossgates and Winmore Ward.
Good morning, Isaac Wilson, Councillor for Wheatwood.
Morning, Nick Tones, School Staff Representative.
Morning, Helen Bellamy, School Staff Representative.
Tony Britton, representing Roman Catholic Diocese of Leeds.
Good morning, everybody. Councillor Karen Renshaw, representing Ardsley and Robin Hood Ward.
Good morning, everybody. I'm Councillor David Jenkins from Killingbeck and Seacroft.
Good morning, Councillor Jules Hesselwood, representing Wheatwood Ward.
Good morning, everyone. Councillor Andy Rontry, I represent Kirkstall on the council.
Morning, Councillor John Garvani, Horsforth Ward.
Good morning, Councillor Nkila Manaka, and from Bermondsey and Richmond Hill.
Good morning, everyone. Councillor Oliver Edwards, representing Guiseley and Rawdon Ward, and as of 3:22 a.m. this morning, also an uncle to Benjamin, which is a great name, isn't it, Ben?
Oh, congratulations. Yeah, I love being an auntie. Councillor Helen Hayden, Executive Member for Children and Families.
Good morning, Pete Thorpe, Interim Director for Children and Families.
Good morning, Phil Evans, Deputy Director Resources and Transformation and the Interim Deputy Director for Learning in Children and Families.
Good morning, Ben Finley, Interim Deputy Director for Children and Families.
Good morning, Rebecca McCormack, Chief Officer for Education in Children and Families.
Good morning, Sinead Skull, Young Lives Leeds Rep.
Morning, Maria Adams, Leeds Parent Carer Forum.
Good morning, Tim Goodall, Councillor for Headingley and Hyde Park.
Good morning, everybody. Ryan Stevenson, Councillor for Harewood.
Morning, Councillor Rick Downs, Otley and Yeadon Ward.
Morning, everyone. I'm Rob Clayton. I'm the Scrutiny Advisor to the board.
Thanks very much, Rob. Right, we have a full house this morning. If I could just remind you all, when you're speaking, could you please pull the mics as close to you as you can, please? And if you're using an iPad or a laptop, could you make sure that they do not get in front of the microphone? It's quite difficult for the ancient people at the top of the room here, one of us, to hear what's going on. So, Rob, would you like to run us through items 1 to 5, please? Thank you.
Yes, thank you, Chair. The usual procedural items that we take at each board meeting. So item 1, Chair, is appeals against refusal of inspection of documents, and there are no such appeals on today's agenda. Item 2 is exclusions of the press and public, and no items fit those criteria, Chair. Item 3 is late items of business, and we have no late items of business today, Chair. Item 4 is declarations of interest, and I will briefly pause to allow any elected members to declare any under Leeds City Council's Code of Conduct. I shall take silence as none. Item 5 is apologies, and today we have apologies from Anas Kittu, who's our primary governor representative, and Andrew Graham, who's our Church of England representative. Thank you, Chair.
Thanks, Rob. Moving on to the substantive items of the agenda, the minutes of the last meeting on the 16th of February. I'll quickly run through them. They start at page 7 of your pack. Does anyone have anything to comment on pages 7 and 8? 9 and 10? 11 or 12? 13 or 14, 15, 16, and page 17. No? Okay. We do have some matters arising. The first one is minute 84, but it's referred to as minute 72 on your agenda because it refers to minute 72 of the previous minutes of January. Rob, do you want to just follow on, please?
Yes, thanks, Councillor Flynn. Yes, just briefly. So the board requested that some changes to the Ombudsman reporting process is undertaken for where there is a public interest report produced by the Ombudsman Office. I've taken that away for a couple of months and obviously updated on it last time. So there is a process in place for how that is dealt with, which includes executive board and other parts of sort of consulting with the scrutiny board as well. And the proposal is that that process will be adjusted to reflect the board request. It's subject to a few further discussions, but that is where we are currently. And I will confirm via email to board members once that is finalised. Thank you, Chair.
Thanks, Rob. And minute 85.
Yeah, so under the minute 85 there was some request for additional information in relation to the SEND transport policy item that we took. Those have been submitted and I'm working with colleagues in the Directorate to provide that to members. That they'll be coming out as soon as possible. The focus of the team in the Directorate is on actually dealing with the appeals processes, so that's partially an explanation for the delay. Thanks, Chair.
Thanks again, Rob. And minute 87 about the child bereavement service.
Yes, just very briefly on that. That was just simply that it is brought back as soon as possible in the new municipal year, and that will be programmed into our work programme, Chair, for 2026-27.
Thanks, Rob. Can I then please have a mover to approve as a correct record the minutes of the meeting held on the 16th of February? Isaac. Yeah. Seconder? All in favour? Anyone against? I think all unanimous. Thank you very much indeed. Okay, moving on to item number 7, which is area-based planning update. Councillor Hayden, would you like to start us on this one, please? Thank you.
Yes, thank you, Chair. So this report provides an update on the development of our area-based planning approach and the learning from the 2 pilot areas in Guiseley, Eden and Rawdon, and in Rothwell, Robin Hood and Woodlesford. The purpose of the pilots has been to test a more localised, partnership-driven way of understanding sufficiency pressures, future demand, and the wider factors that influence school organisation. The report sets out why the review and addressing the challenges is taking longer than anticipated. The area-based review meetings held in November demonstrated that sufficiency pressures are closely interlinked with financial sustainability, SEND provision, community impact and governance arrangements, and these issues cannot be resolved safely through rapid or isolated action. Ward members in the pilot areas have been involved throughout, and although engagement levels have varied, which is not unusual for this type of work, all sessions were delivered with the appropriate officer and legal support. The feedback from schools and partners has been valuable in shaping the next phase. The emphasis is on taking the time to get this right, because decisions about school places have long-term implications for communities, for children and for the wider education system. The area-based reviews have helped to identify where further work is needed before any potential of proposals could be developed, and our priority remains a sustainable, inclusive and transparent approach to school place sufficiency planning. I'd like to thank everyone who has been involved, governors, head teachers, education officers, as well as ward members. It is a really tricky thing to get right, and so I'd like to thank everyone for their time and commitment on this. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed, Councillor Hayden. Any of the officers would like to take this one on? Rebecca?
Hi, thank you. It's not a huge amount to add from what Councillor Hayden has outlined. The meetings that we held in November were really well attended by everyone who was invited. So it was a range of governors, head teachers, elected members from the areas to have those conversations about the issue in the area in terms of the number of places available. What we're really aware of is that we need to take the time to have those conversations so that we're not in a position of anything coming from behind closed doors, and so we have been able to have those really open conversations since those sessions in November and ongoing since. We are acutely aware that there were a sense sometimes in the room that partners didn't feel able to share a view about their suggestions or proposals, but we're really pleased that partners have then taken it up on themselves to email us and contact us since those meetings. In Geyser, Yeadon and Rawdon, the discussions resulted in a number of schools suggesting that they would look to reduce their published admissions number, and that those have been consulted upon by the schools and determined in their admissions arrangements for September 2027. We continue to support Yeadon Westfield infants and junior around their proposed amalgamation. In Rothwell, Robin Hood and Woodlesford, we yet don't have a proposal for the reduction of places, but we do continue to explore the options as we go through those conversations. I think when we last talked about this, we would hoped that those conversations in the autumn term would result in proposals coming forward a little bit more quickly. What we've learned through this process is that need to continue to have open conversations and make sure that we're not just pushing forward with decisions because of the need to reduce places quickly, and that we are involving as many people as we possibly can throughout that process. Is that okay for now? We'll pause for questions.
Thank you, Rebecca. Yeah, we raised a couple of issues at the last, well, at least as I did, whether or not the quorum was sufficient enough to deal with the subject at hand, that we felt that, or I felt anyway, there should be a legal representative on at each meeting, basically, and that each meeting should be chaired by a very senior officer. Could you cover those sort of points before we move on to other members? Thank you.
Yep, no problem. So the area-based planning board, so our children and families group, legal are a member of that group and have attended every meeting that we've had. The meeting is chaired by myself as Chief Officer for Education, and we continue to kind of explore those conversations. In terms of the quorum for the group, the legal representative is a key part of that board, and also the partner from comms, from our comms team, to ensure that we've got that communication right.
Thank you. I've heard rumours, and that's all they were, that that the attendance at some of the meetings wasn't as good as perhaps it could have been by various people who could or should have been there. Could you comment on that? It is a rumour, I hasten to add. It's not a statement of fact.
Yeah, happy to. So we did have a look at the signing in sheets for each of the area-based meetings. I assumed it was the area-based meetings rather than our board meetings. So at the Geyser, Yeadon and Rawdon meeting on the 11th of November, the schools represented were Geyser Primary, Hawksworth C of E, Queensway, Rawdon Littlemore, Rawdon St Peters, Rufford Park, St Oswald's, Tranmere Park, Yeadon Westfield Infants and Yeadon Westfield Junior. There were also representatives from the Airborough Learning Partnership and the Collaborative Learning Trust, which are the two trusts who have schools in the area. The diocese, the Catholic diocese and the Church of England diocese were represented. There were councillor representation from Councillor Leighton, Councillor Thompson, Councillor Campbell, Councillor Edwards recorded apologies, and then there were local authority officers from across learning improvement, SEND, learning infrastructure, the Deputy Director was present, and our legal officer. So that was at Geyser, Yeadon, Rawdon. It was a similar picture at Rothwell, Robin Hood and Woodlesford on the 18th of November, with Carlton Primary School, Coburn, Hague Road, Holy Trinity, Alton, Robin Hood, Rothwell, Rothwell St Mary's, Rothwell Victoria and Woodlesford Primaries all represented, along with the Abbey Multi-Academy Trust and Coburn Trust. Both the Catholic and the Church of England diocese were present, as were local ward members Councillor Chapman and Councillor Galton, and local authority officers again from across learning improvement, SEND, learning infrastructure, the Deputy Director and our legal officer.
Very comprehensive. You obviously came well prepared.
It was easier to list it out.
Thanks very much indeed. Do any of the members, Councillor Downs?
Yeah, thanks, Chair. I think this is a very important piece of work. I'm glad to see it going ahead. Bearing in mind that one of the concerns was that in the Airborough area there was two successive proposed closures of a school, which I felt hadn't had the full depth of a review, which is now what we're doing. I am a governor at Rufford Park, and I can confirm that Rufford Park have taken the decision to reduce PAN from 45 to 30 in response to the falling birth rates, and so that hopefully will help the situation. I think it would be also useful if ward members could have an update with officers just to go through what's actually currently on the table and what you're considering, so that we can have a bit more of an input at this point, because you've had the discussions and there's feedback coming through, and you can see from everything that's going on here how complex the issues are there, especially around SEND. There's a high level of requirement in the area, and I don't believe the provision is currently there, and it's something we need to work to ensure that we get the education system right in that area. So I would really welcome perhaps an update meeting for ward members.
Rebecca?
Yeah, we're happy to arrange that, not a problem.
Councillor Hayden.
Thank you, Chair. Just to say a huge thank you to the schools in Guiseley and Rawdon, Yeadon area. You mentioned one school that's taken the decision to reduce their pupil admission numbers. It's one of two schools. I'm really grateful to those schools for their proactive work on this and working together as for the area. Absolutely committed to getting this right, which is why the proposals are not yet fully, because schools have still been emailing us January, February time with as and when their processes allow them to do with different ideas. It will be published, and then it will go out for wider consultation, but very happy for ward members to be given that briefing. But then it will be on the table. It will not be a fait accompli from these meetings. It will then go out to wider consultation to get any feedback on the proposals, which will be options, not a proposal for an area. So yeah, thank you.
Councillor Downs.
Yeah, just very briefly, thanks, Councillor Hayden. That's reassuring, and I think it's now, pardon me for saying it, a more mature approach and a more necessary approach, and I'm pleased to see that it is happening, and that the whole area has an input. And also going back to the schools within the area, that they are working together as much as possible, which is really what is needed, because it's children's education which matters, and that's what we've got to get right. So I fully support that. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Downs, Councillor Hayden. Councillor Edwards.
Thank you, Chair. And I would just I'd echo what Councillor Downs has said. I think trust is really important here, and these are sensitive topics, and I think people locally. I think there were issues before with Queensway in particular, and that's something that's very much on many people's minds. And so I welcome the fact that this has been proactive, the fact that this has been bringing in all of the different schools. I think the fact that many of the schools and different bodies were represented indicates the level of interest. But people also recognise that there is a challenge. So I would echo the request for ongoing engagement with us as ward members, and I think also with the community as well, and that's something that we can help with as local ward members. So but because this is a challenge across the area, and I think people recognise that when confronted with the figures.
Thank you, Councillor Edwards. Anyone want to come back to that one? No? Okay. Any other questions or comments? Shanaz.
Thank you, Chair. I think it's great that the work is being done, and the report also recognises that increased anxiety for children and families, and it also recognises that if insufficient information isn't passed across the communities, that could also spoil relationships. So my question is, how do you plan to engage families and also community organisations who also can have a lot of intel and are working with communities also? Thank you.
Rebecca?
Thank you. I think at the point where we have a proposal to consider, at this point there is no other than the two primary schools who are reducing their published admission number. Any proposal that comes forward and requires that statutory process and that full consultation, we will look to engage obviously with the whole community, including community organisations and the schools. We, through our Child Friendly Leeds team, we've got really strong experience in engaging with young people through the consultation process. It's obviously really difficult when we're talking about something as sensitive as school changes in an area, but we have got that experience of how we engage with young people in that process, just to seek their views.
I think my concern is just to ensure that the community and organisations don't feel like it's been done to, and they've been heard prior to any decisions have been made. So I think that's just one point.
Councillor Hayden.
Yes, it's really important, but it's also important to be honest with people. If we don't have the children in school, then we don't have the money going into the budgets, and therefore the education of every child suffers. And it is an emotional thing, your school where you go to, which is why I'm really happy that in the Guiseley, Eden, Rawdon area, that two schools have been really proactive in reducing their admissions numbers, which will really help, but we need more. There is a real issue with falling birth rates, and it's something that we have to tackle whilst doing it in recognising, which we do, the level of anxiety this will cause. And it's about how we manage that, as well as giving people a set of proposals. But with the two schools coming forward, it's made it so much easier because their proactiveness, we will consult on that, but it takes it does lessen the stress burden, so that's why I'm incredibly grateful. But we will, with also trying to balance the fact that we need to get this right, that we need to get it right in terms of our the school's financial situation, but also the future, because these children will move on from these schools, and it's what's left behind that we, so managing their feelings, their anxiety, and helping them, supporting the whole community, whereas, tackling it in a really mature way, what is actually, a very difficult problem.
Thank you, Councillor Hayden. Councillor Wilson.
Thank you. Really interesting approach taken, and the report findings too seem quite hopeful to me. And I guess the point about this approach is that it looks at the whole system. It kind of creates a kind of honest forum for people to try and figure out the best way to deal with things, and I guess helps the other people involved in these decisions feel ownership over what's going to happen. What I wondered was, are there other areas of work in children and families, which often is it's a portfolio that includes a lot of complexity and is really important to people. Are there other areas of work that's been looked at for this kind of approach outside of school numbers planning?
Thank you. It's a really good question. So first of all, just listening to the conversation, it's good to hear that the maturity of the approach has been recognised, and I think it is absolutely the point you've made about people feeling ownership is correct. I think when we get to wider services for families, it's understanding that continuity of need and how that's met. So there will always be areas of the work in children and families where we're designing around heading off need, which would go into statutory service if we don't have the right support. So it's understanding how far back along that continuum you can go to have a meaningful conversation. But I think there would be, as we create I've talked before about the children's offer and how the offer for children hangs together for families. That's the point where we're really deeply into thinking about how do the assets within communities hold together to provide the conditions for children to grow up, for families to be successful, and for needs to be met early and not to escalate. And I think you're right, Councillor. There is some reflection we can do around how we are taking those communities with us on that journey, so they understand their role that they're playing, which is in the community end, not in the service end of meeting need. So I'm not going to say we've got the answers all of that, but we'll certainly take away the challenge that you've given us.
Councillor Hayden.
We're in a really different situation at the moment, and actually part of my challenge that comes to us as local councillors, because we are seeing a lot of money coming into the city for various different projects from the government. So what we're seeing in that is the neighbourhood health project that is in the east of the city is very much doing that in terms of bringing everyone together. We're focusing on 0 to 2s, so there's children's services in there, but it's been, and obviously health, social work, but also the community being brought in to really look at how we deliver on a neighbourhood level, and looking at, and each neighbourhood is different to each other, even if they are neighbouring neighbourhoods. That was clumsy, but also the Pride of Place projects that are happening are very much from the community upwards, and going to be developed, co-developed, and actually hopefully the community will develop them fully with our support as a council, and maybe even in the future not have be able to fully function. So that focus on area and the community working together, and it coming from the community to address the needs of the community is something that I very much support. It's at 10:30 every Monday. I think it's our job as elected representatives to make sure that coordination happens, and that Best Start family hubs, Pride in Place, Youth Futures, neighbourhood health, they all combine to make sure that we've got as much for our communities as we possibly get out by all those different streams working together, rather than in silos, and working with the community to know what's best for that community wherever they are in Leeds.
Thank you, Councillor Hayden. Councillor Wilson, do you want to come back? Okay. Councillor Jenkins.
Yes, on paragraph 70, I just wondered if you could outline the future plans for further areas to be looked at for area-based reviews.
Okay, Chair, if I take that one. Sorry.
Rebecca, sorry. Yes.
Sorry, thanks. So as we get revised population, so birth data, and also the admissions data from this April's allocations for September, we'll be reviewing again across all of the city, and as we move into the summer period, looking at which areas are we identifying as needing an area-based review. So we routinely share with all of the city, across the city, the planning sheets that detail where we've got surplus places, where we've got a pressure on places, and ask those areas and those schools to continue to review those and understand what steps they may need to take. Obviously, where we do that review and identify areas that there's a significant pressure and we need to take action, that's where we would consider bringing forward an area-based review. So we'll be updating that in the summer period once we have those updated births and the pupil projections based on allocations for September places in the summer period. So usually they're released around June time when we have the confirmed data.
Councillor Jenkins? Okay. Thanks very much. Any other comments or questions from members? Okay, just a couple of things, my own perspective. It follows off from what Councillor Jenkins just mentioned. It does appear that the lessons learned from Queensway have sort of gone home, but it's equally important that the lessons learned continue to be applied in future, because it's still fairly fresh in the mind and things tend to sort of die off after a while. So anyway, good to see that. The impact on children, young people and their families of falling places at schools, and the effect it's going to have on schools is or can be fairly dramatic, as we saw in Queensway. And I wondered whether, very early days yet, I know, when we're looking at two areas, whether the schools in general around the city are taking this on board and looking at what the future holds for them in terms of falling numbers, etc. Rebecca?
I'd say they are. I think schools understand based on the data that we're sharing. I think we have to be realistic that at times there continues to be that sense that they want the local authority to be making those decisions, and we're continuing to explain and push back and explain that schools need to consider the data that they have about their areas. The head teachers obviously know their communities well. That data supports their information and intelligence. We have had a number of schools so each year admissions arrangements have to be determined by the 28th of February. So we have had a number of schools approaching us about reducing their published admission number for September 2027. And so we've talked through with those schools about that. So I would say schools are aware. They reflect on the data that they receive. I think we continue to remind them that this, it's not worth waiting for the local authority to have to make the decision for them. It is about them taking action into their own hands and having those open conversations with us about anything they'd like to explore.
Thank you, Rebecca. I forgot to mention the emphasis placed on SEND as well, which I think came to the fore at Queensway as well, so thanks very much. Helen, you wanted to come in?
It just hearing the talk about the reduction in PAN, I mean, it just strikes me. I know there's not a lot of money around at the moment, but the best way to improve pupils' chances in terms of the influence schools can have on children's progress and life chances is smaller classes. I mean, we have got some of the biggest classes in primary education certainly across Europe. And I just think, really reducing PAN, it may take a class away, but I think it's an opportunity to maybe reduce the amount of children and the ratio of educator to pupil, because that is something that will make a massive difference, particularly given the movement of, I know there is money coming in terms of training and expertise in moving some SEND children where appropriate into mainstream, and there will be extra provision and maybe parallel provision as well. But I think that ratio of pupil to educator is key to outcomes.
Anyone like to comment?
Can I comment?
Elsa Hayden.
Yeah, you're absolutely right that the lower the class number to teacher, the better the outcomes. That's just educational fact. However, when you are, we'd need to change the national approach to school funding in order to make that viable for schools to have those smaller class sizes. So when I was speaking to a head teacher last year, when the numbers that were coming in to her reception, and I went to visit a fantastic scheme that they buy in leaflets, which gets children doing gymnastic type in order to strengthen their ability to learn. So yes, at 9 o'clock on a Monday morning, I was doing a plank. But the head teacher came to speak to me about the fact that she had 23 coming into reception, and that is £42,000 less into her budget. That is a teacher. So we'd need to look at the funding of schools, and that would be a national issue. However, at the last exec board, I took 2 papers that were about creating SEND places in 2 of our primary schools in the Wheatwood ward. Those were places that are specialist speech and language places, and incredible work done by those schools and the local authority with a trust, I can't remember the name of it now, and that's a way forward for me, because that's what I want. I want children with SEND needs to be in mainstream schools, to go to their local, be able to go to their local schools and get specialist provision. And the falling numbers does allow that to happen. We've just got to manage it really, really carefully and make sure it does happen for our children.
Thank you, Councillor Hayden. Helen, would you like to come back? Okay. Thanks very much. I don't think any more questions or comments from members, so we can move on to the recommendations. To note the update on the implementation of the area planning approach to school organisational change and school place sufficiency, including the review undertaken to date, provide comment on the progress made and emerging learning from the initial primary planning areas and proposed approach to the next steps, and to note that future proposals arising from the area planning based approach will be progressed through the Council's established statutory and governance processes. Would someone like to propose that, please? Councillor Edwards, yeah. Seconded? Thank you very much indeed. All in favour? Any against? Any abstentions? Unanimous again, I think. Okay, Rob? Yep. Thank you very much indeed. Moving on then to item number 8, which is special educational needs and disabilities, starting on paragraph page 29 rather. And whoever's going to speak to this one, I'd welcome some comments on the new schools white paper, of course, keeping as brief as you can, basically. Councillor Hayden, would you like to lead off on this one?
Thank you, Chair. So this report shows both the progress made and the scale of the challenge we continue to face, and includes the SEND update report considered by Exec Board on the 11th of February. While significantly more EHC assessments have been completed between January 25 and December 25 than ever before, timeliness has unfortunately not improved. However, work is underway so that improvement in this area will begin to be seen during 2026 and will be monitored as part of the SEND improvement plan. We have now strengthened single governance structure through the SEND and AP, that's Alternative Provision, Partnership Improvement Board, bringing education, health and care partners together. EHCP timeliness and annual reviews remain key areas of focus. The ambition to reach national compliance levels by June 2027 is ambitious but realistic, and it reflects the scale of the challenge. Quality is just as important, and we are working with schools, health partners and families to improve the accuracy and usefulness of the plans. We know that families need a system that is clearer, more consistent and more responsive. Improving their experience is central to the work underway. Since the Exec Board report in February, the Government has published its white paper, which focuses on broadening inclusion, which I spoke about earlier, early intervention and family support, which is summarised in the cover report. As I've said previously, what we want for every child in Leeds is to have access to an education that is suitable for them, that is also local to them in their community. It will take time to get right. I welcome the ambition through these reforms to ensure all children are supported to reach their potential. We absolutely, and I absolutely recognise it is absolutely not good enough, the timeliness of EHCPs. I apologise to every child and their family and the schools. We are working really hard, and we have strengthened those governance and also doing the parallel work of clearing the backlog, but any new ones that come in, tackling them as timeliness as possible, in a timely way as possible. So, but I do welcome these reforms going forward. They will take time though, but I look forward to a city where all children, no matter what their need, unless it's really complex, go to school with their mates in their local community. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Hayden. Glad to see that you mentioned the delays in assessment and review of EHCPs, because the impact on the families concerned must be considerable. So thank you very much indeed for that. Who'd like to take this one on? Pete, Phil?
Thank you, Chair. Really nothing to add other than Councillor Hayden's comments. I'd probably just congratulate Rob on his summary of the school's white paper. I think he picks up most of those significant issues. So no, but happy to take questions.
Thanks very much indeed. Questions or comments from the board? Helen.
Again, this is kind of more like from a national perspective, but obviously it does affect local schools and multi-academy trusts in particular. In the white paper, there's I'm getting to the aspect of having more money available for children's education. So there is a reference to capping and value for money in terms of CEO's pay. Now, I know that there's a school that's moved into Leeds, an academy, and that CEO is on 290,000 for 9 schools. Now, where is value for money there? I know that the school that is in Leeds they're struggling. We are working with the school. There are channels of communication from the union, but in terms of value for money, that is a massive amount of money that could be reduced, and it could be used to provide another teacher, a number of other support staff members who could work with children with SEND. It's just absolutely diabolical that how much more than the Prime Minister is that person earning. And the Board of Trustees have just let that happen as well. I think there needs to be more done. I know I know there's already something in place. I've only just found out that there was already something in place in terms of MAT CEO pay, but it doesn't appear that anybody's doing anything or using that. Sorry, I can't recall the name of what the process is called, but nobody's using it at present. That's been mentioned again, it's been mentioned in the white paper, CEO pay, and I think that absolutely has to be looked at, because it's a travesty when there's many thousands of pounds that could be going into the staff on the ground in those schools to support children with SEND.
You, Helen, would any of the officers like to address? Councillor Hayden.
I'll pick that up. Obviously, it is without beyond our scope at local. We have this system. I entirely agree with you. Yeah, what people are worth to be paid. I'd rather, somebody, a Senko in a school was getting that kind of money than, the chief executive. But yeah, I can't, it's beyond our scope here. I would say that that at least what this white paper does bring in those reforms, that we're not going to push to reverse the system we've got. What we can do in Leeds is work with the reforms to make sure and work in partnership with all our schools, because in the end they are Leeds kids who go to Leeds schools. The children don't know what governance structure is their school is under, or what legal framework their school is under, and it's our job to work in partnership as lots of different schools, as the trusts, as local authorities, to get the best education for all our children in Leeds. And that's what I'm working really hard on. It's I'll leave it there, Chair. Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor Hayden. Any of the officers who'd like to comment? Pete.
I'll comment, it's probably safer. I think it's important to remember that academies are exempt charities, and therefore, as such, they are governed by the Academy's Handbook, which is issued by the Department for Education. So the local authority has no influence or bearing on CEO pays in trusts. In essence, the handbook requires that pay is proportionate, justified and transparent. Those are the regulations, but it is for the Department for Education to have a view on whether pay is excessive or not.
Thank you, Pete. Do you want to come in on that point, Councillor Hesselwood? Yeah, please.
Just very quickly, myself and Helen are very aware of the rules that govern academies and local authority schools, but I still think we need to put on record that paying someone that amount of money is disgusting when we've got schools that are struggling, and that money could be used, as Helen says, to pay for Senkos, teaching assistants and teachers in schools. One person is not worth that amount of money to run an academy trust of 9, not any academy trust, but certainly of 9 schools. Sorry, it really annoys me, and I just want to say that.
Okay, thanks, Councillor Hesselwood. There are limitations on what the Scrutiny Board can cover, of course. Councillor Stevenson.
Thank you, Chair. I was going to just comment something on something in the white paper as well, but whilst we're on the point of being disgusted about where money intended for children's education goes, of course it's worth noting, and we've heard from the unions today that representative people work for the unions, that money that's intended for the education of pupils is also diverted into the trade unions, and perhaps we want to, in terms of facilitation time. Well, there is
if we can keep sorry, I have to correct the record. None of that money is diverted to a trade union.
Councillor Hesselwood, please. Everyone's got a point of order, whether you agree with them or not. Everyone's got an opinion, whether you agree with it or not. We try to keep politics out of Scrutiny Board business, and I hopefully will do that. I give everybody a chance. To sort of cover something. Councillor Stephen, if Councillor Stephen can finish his point, and then I can come back to you. Okay.
Okay. So as the interim director said, the Academy Trust Handbook and others say that things like trade union facilitation time has to be recorded so everybody can see it's public, in the public domain. The point I was going to ask was, in the school white paper, there is reference that the government has fallen short of its commitment as such to essentially eradicate free schools and academies and make sure all new schools are local authority. And one of the things that's put forward is that the halfway measure as such was to allow local authorities to set up multi-academy trusts. So at this stage, is there a plan afoot or discussions afoot for Leeds City Council to set up a multi-academy trust? Presumably that function would be in line with the Academy Trust Handbook, and if that plan is afoot in future, given the conversation this morning, I'd be interested perhaps the exec member could say what she thinks the CEO of that trust would be paid. Would it be pegged at a director level, or would it be pegged at her salary, or that of a principal of a school? Where would we pitch that in terms of setting up our own mat as a council?
Councillor Hayden, sorry.
Oh, I'm now expected to be a human resources expert, am I, in terms of pitching wage? I don't think anybody would want my wage, Councillor Stevenson, to run, well, anything. We never made a pledge. The Labour government, in its manifesto, never made a pledge to eradicate free schools and academies. unfortunately, that jar is fully open and it's all out. And going back to where we were would be very difficult. So that pledge was never made. We have no plans at the moment for setting up a multi-academy trust, and it would take somebody with far more skills than I have to decide on what somebody gets paid. But if we take into account what a GP get paid, or maybe a heart surgeon, or somebody who, that life and death holds in their hands, they're not getting to, what was it, Helen? £230,000? No, they're not. So I think I'd pitch it somewhere where, the level of what work they're undertaking would, if I had my way.
Thank you, Councillor Hayden. I did take advice on the point of order that was raised there, and I'm informed by the office here it does not countenance a point of order on that particular sort of issue. I'd like to draw a line under this particular sort of subject. Councillor Heselwood, please. Could you please put your hand down? Thank you.
I'd like to speak, please. I need to respond to that.
I think she's entitled to speak.
It's
not a point of order.
Okay.
That was not true, and I need to respond to
Councillor Hayden.
Yes, on the point, sorry, Councillor Heselwood, on the point of money being moved from SEND children to pay for unions. So, if I just explain how it happens, the money that is allocated for various functions in schools goes to Schools Forum. The money that goes to the union function is nowhere near connected to the high needs block of funding at all. Sorry, I meant to say this in my answer. I got carried away. And it's a decision by Schools Forum to pay for union representation in schools, and that is done by the schools at Schools Forum. Is no way connected to the high needs block, and the unions provide a excellent and incredibly necessary service. I've been a teacher myself for 16 years. I would not be the teacher that I was without union support, and it is incredibly necessary for not just our teaching staff, but the teaching assistants, but also staff who work in the kitchens, everything. They serve an enormously important role in making our schools the very best that they can be.
Thank you very much indeed, Councillor Hayden. I think we've covered this point to the nth degree. I do not like political sort of issues being brought in at any sort of stage during the course of meetings. We are getting close to elections. I understand that. I also understand the feelings of people involved, whether they're on the trade union side or not. And I fully understand why people have very strong feelings on the way money is spent on education. I have them myself, but I keep them to myself. And I think we have covered all of the issues so far. Councillor Heselwood, exceptionally, if you could just keep your comments very briefly, please, and please try to stay off politics. Okay.
I will. I need to respond to that comment because it was untrue. None of that money goes to a trade union. The facilities pot, which is very minuscule in comparison to everything else, is held by the council and pays for a small number of teachers to be seconded to do that union work. So I just want to put the record straight that none of that money goes to a trade union, which that was the accusation.
Just to clarify, and then we're going to close the subject down, Councillor Stevenson.
It's on the substantive point. We'll have that argument elsewhere. On the substantive point I made, just on the local authority MAT establishment, can we just be useful to explore? Obviously, it's in a white paper. It is the government's wish that local authorities set up multi-academy trusts under the current framework. I suspect if that comes to fruition, we'll want to do that in Leeds, or the current administration would want to do that in Leeds rather than not. So I just wonder, at a point at which that starts to formulate, has there been any discussion so far between maybe DfE and officials in Leeds around practicalities around how that might work? Have we been used, has Leeds been used as a sounding board, for example, with the DfE to scope out some of those things? I say that I was involved with the DfE on some of the scoping out around how mat inspections might work, which was quite a fruitful discussion. And if so, internally, have we yet discussed how we might, for example, appoint trustees? Because, as mentioned, it's the trustees who are responsible for decisions in those. And how would that fit with the council's constitution? Have we explored anything around that yet, around appointments of a board of trustees?
Chair, if I can respond to that point. So, as Councillor Stevenson has pointed out, it is a white paper. I think it's important that we recognise it's a white paper. It is out for consultation. It is not yet the determined way forward from the government, and I'm sure the government would want to set out that we want a full, robust and meaningful consultation on the white paper. My reading of the white paper, Councillor Stevenson, is slightly differently. My reading of the white paper says that there's an expectation that every school will join a trust, and therefore there's an opportunity for the local authority to consider whether it wishes to operate on a trust model, particularly for those schools that didn't wish to join existing trusts. I think the other point to make out, and this is an interesting one for me to say as an officer who's working in this area, the white paper only came out incredibly recently. I think there's an awful lot in there, and it's been an awful lot of conversations and discussions, but we haven't yet worked our way through all the elements of detail. I think there are some elements of the white paper that quite rightly we are focusing on, and the main focus currently is around the potential for the changes that relate to SEND and EHCPs, because that's the area that, to be honest, is the biggest issue for us in the city, and it's the area that we should be concentrating on. The white paper does have a consultation period that does run for some time, and we are now picking up the conversations with the DfE around the potential changes, but currently, as Councillor Hayden has set out, the council doesn't have a position in relation to the trust issue. Should that progress, then obviously members will be kept informed of that, and my view would be it would be a decision for the council to make if it did wish to move in that direction, but it's not yet been the subject of any substantive conversations.
Thank you, Phil. Councillor Stevenson, okay. Helen, you wanted to come in. Just very briefly, please.
Yeah, I will be very brief, but I think it's important, particularly given that this is a public meeting and what Councillor Ryan Stevenson just said, that people do have the facts. So the research by Gregor Gall, Professor of Industrial Relations at Bradford Uni, found that for every £1 spent on facilities time, which is what you were referring to before, the accrued benefits have a value of between £2.31 and £6.24. On Thursday, I had a members' meeting. I was at a members' meeting, and I was invited before the members' meeting to meet with the head teacher and head of HR in order to advise them on a process that they're about to consult on in order for that to be carried out smoothly. That is very cheap, me going in as a teacher seconded than an advisor. You may be pulling faces, but you're the other person who brought this up. You're the person
please,
who brought
if you
this
could,
up.
please don't. If you could
No,
stop
well,
talking
sorry.
across the table, please. I did
The
give you.
benefits to the MAT, the benefits to the organisation is £2.31 to £6.24, where they're paying £1.
Right, I'm closing this item down now. I did ask you
but
to
we're
keep
not
it.
talking 200. We're not talking 290,000 here.
Helen.
We're talking a
Helen,
pittance.
please.
Okay.
Okay. Thank you very much indeed. Councillor Goodall.
Thank you, Chair. On page 31, it talks about the additional funding and support in Best Start family hubs. I just wanted to check how this will work in terms of what's been happening in Leeds with family hubs and children's centres. Could it mean that more money is coming in and therefore we would have to have expand what we've got. So we might have to reopen some of the children's centres that have closed, for example. And my other question is different, but I'll ask it. On page 37, I just wondered if we have any idea, I know it's very early days, paragraphs 4.5 and 4.6, how the specialist teamwork is going so far, and if the agency workers are all in place. And as a union caseworker, I'd just like to say the amount of money we save organisations by doing casework because we stop things going to tribunal.
Would anyone like to respond to that? Councillor Hayden?
Thank you, Chair. I'll start. Yes, there is more money coming in, but even after the review of children's centres, we have 31 in the city, which is more than anywhere else in the country. And it's about the offer that we have for children. So actually, the majority of work from children's centres happens in families' homes. And so I'm really pleased that the review actually increased the number of senior family support workers who go out and do that work by 27%. So that's 4 extra full-time equivalents, so people on the ground delivering that work. And so, yes, we are really working with the government because Leeds is in a really good place to take forward this Best Start Family Hub model, and Rebecca will be able to give you more because she's been working on it with Catherine Ingold, our Children and Families officer who sits within Public Health, and I want to thank them for the huge amount of work they've been done on this very quickly, but they've actually taken what we've reviewed, and it took a year to get a full review of the children's centres. That work was really valuable in then taking forward. So the government have copied and adopted our name for Best Start. We've had that for a few years. Then 18 months ago we started Best Start and Beyond, and then the government have picked up on that, and so we have got £5.8 million over 3 years to deliver Best Start family work in the city, which will build on and increase the work that we are already doing, and pivot a little bit because what the outcomes that the government wants, such as a particular type of parenting, and so that we can achieve a good level of development in 74%, just under 74% of our children. That's a target. We want to go for more of our children than that, reaching good level of development with this extra support and work. But I'll let, because Rebecca's more the expert on this, I'll let her, if that's all right, Chair.
Rebecca?
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, so we're really excited to receive the additional funding around the Best Start Family Hubs. But as Councillor Hayden has outlined, the expectation is that we build on the work that we already have. It can't be used to replace anything that's previously been closed or to restart anything that's previously been closed. So the requirements around Best Start are for us to look at how we use evidence-based parenting programmes and home learning environment initiatives, so how we can support families to engage with their children in the home learning environment and to build those skills and that preparedness for starting school. What we're really clear on, and we'll touch on this probably in the next paper, is around those challenges that we face around good levels of development in Leeds, and that's been for quite a long time now that we've been working on how do we improve children's outcomes at the early years, at the end of the early years foundation stage. So what we're really clear on is that as we begin to roll out the Best Start Family Hubs approach, is making sure we're doing something a little bit different and we're building on the strengths and the things that we've learned from our really strong children's centre offer over the Sure Start and beyond period.
Thank you, Rebecca. Do you want to come back on that one?
Yeah, just briefly come back on that. I still am picking up on real concern from parents of not having some of those physical centres that have been closed. It's partly that the parents learned from each other, and it's also the diversity of parents that went to the centres, particularly diversity of income levels, for example. People talked about how much they learned from being together in that physical space with other people. and it's I appreciate that a lot of work can be done at home, but that's something that a lot of parents are saying is really missing.
Thanks very much indeed. Councillor Rowntree.
Sorry.
Sorry, Phil.
The other part of the question.
Sorry, just pick up on the second part of Councillor Goodall's question. So all the procurement arrangements are now being concluded in relation to the external resource that we're bringing on board. And just by way of explanation, there are two elements of external resource in relation to EPs and caseworkers. That's an element of resource that's seeking to deal with the backlog, and an element of resource that's seeking to work through the steady state, so that we don't have a difference of moving forward. We've also now, the agency arrangements are in place. I'm not absolutely certain whether those agency people are in as of today, but we've navigated all of the issues that we have in terms of agency spend, because as you'll know, given the Council's financial challenge, there is a really robust process in terms of agency workers, because we don't really want to be spending money on agency workers if we're able to avoid it. At the same time, we have concluded the conversations around what needs to be done to bring in those permanent members of staff, so that the duration and length of any agency provision is reduced, because obviously the Council's general position is to have as many staff as it possibly can do, rather than spend that money on agencies that does come at a price premium.
Thank you, Phil. Councillor Hayden, do you want to come in again?
Yes, just on the point about the spaces, there's nothing to stop, and in fact I know the work's going on. I mean, like I said, we've got 31 children's centres and 33 wards. We have, but it's not just in people's homes, and I know and having those group events, but they do go on in communities, in other buildings run by our children's centre staff. I took mine, I mean, they're bigger than me now, but, you know, to story time in the library, in our local library, and it's a really great event still every Friday. That's run by children's centre staff. So if you have got people who are, please come and see me. I'm very happy to meet with our children's centre leaders to look at what other resources in terms of spaces are in the community, that because that's what they want to do. They want to run groups that bring parents together, but it doesn't have to be in a children's centre, is my point. So very happy to have that conversation about Headingley and Hyde Park, you know, outside of this meeting. That'd be great.
Thank you, Councillor Hayden. Okay, Councillor Goodall, yeah? Thank you. Councillor Rowntree.
Thank you, Chair. I'm looking at the SEND Partnership Improvement Plan on page 45 of the document, and I did scan down the red, amber, green column that's tracking timeliness and progress, and happened on the one red item here. Now, I do understand that the point of producing these documents is to keep track of stuff, and not everything's going to be going to plan all the time. But given that sort of timeliness and backlog and getting through stuff, throughput is so key to the problem we've got here, I'm just wondering how you can give us confidence that you've really got your teeth into this, and that where things seem to be slipping away, that you can bring them back and keep it on track time-wise. I mean, I know this specific case, I mean, it's to do with the appointment of an officer, and I can understand why this has happened, sort of giving the problems of the absence of senior staff towards the back end of last year. But anything you can say yes, we're on that, and we'll sort it. I think that would be helpful. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah. So Chair, the red item is relative to the particular recruitment of a role that aims to be strengthen the link between SEND and social care. It was red because we were trying to recruit that internally initially, because recruiting internally gave us an opportunity of getting someone in that role relatively quickly. That process didn't work. We then went out to market. My understanding is that we do now have
shortlisted on last week.
we've shortlisted for that role, so that role should be filled, hopefully. We obviously got to go through the council's recruitment processes, but we are hopeful that that will be fine.
Thank you, Bill. Councillor Rowntree.
Thanks, Chair. That is reassuring. I mean, I know part of the problem, not particularly I suspect with this post, but generally is national shortage of suitably qualified people, educational psychologists, and that's what's sort of been bearing down on as a whole. Do you think we've got a way, well, not say a way through it, but sort of a sufficient handle on that side of the problem to raise our game in terms of meeting the timelines?
Phil?
Sorry, Chair, I should wait for you to ask me to respond rather than me just offering to respond. Yes, I think is the simple answer. We have appointed a principal educational psychologist who will join us on the 1st of June. She's an experienced PEP already from a neighbouring local authority, and she's working a notice period, has a 3-month notice period. So that's one of the steps in terms of being able to make sure that our EP resource is absolutely focused on the right things. I think the second thing to do is that the work that we've done on a contracting basis provides us a new way of gathering EP resource, and we've got a really significant throughput of work that will be delivered by that EP resource. And then I think the final thing about that is, whilst there's a national shortage of EPs, we also are investing in the case holding and the plan writing element of the work, because if you get the EP advice, that's one thing, but then the EP advice has to be sort of aggregated into the actual plan itself. So we are trying to address all of those issues together, and I think for the first time in quite a while we have all of those sort of levers in place, and we should therefore be able to see a marked improvement in terms of our timeliness. Helpful to say, though, of course, that once a plan is out of time, it remains out of time. So there will be a lag before you start to see an improvement in the council's timeliness figures. At the same time, whilst there's a natural tendency to focus on timeliness, quantity is not the only issue here, and one of the things that we're seeking to do is to seek to improve the level of quality in our EHCP plans, because obviously they are really, really vital, important documents for those families. So we want to make sure that they are meeting the mark in terms of what's required. But the short answer is yes. We've made considerable progress, and we think that we're in a good position to make sure move forward with some solid improvements to the work that we're undertaking.
Thank you, Phil. Okay. Maria.
Thanks. Mine's just some clarifications, really. You've said that you're going to establish a time-limited specialist team with the backlog. Is that the agency staff that you were talking about, and are they in place now?
Yes.
Right, lovely. And also the new SENSAP team that's coming in, the extra workers, that was promised over a year ago. Are they in place now?
Thank you, Chair. Progress in terms of our internal resource has been a lot slower than any of us would have wanted to do. I think there are a number of factors around that, but we have now concluded all those conversations. The decision in relation to the investment in that internal resource is underway. Why we're bringing in agency staff is to help us over that gap between because of the delay. So we will be having the agency staff in to provide the capacity, whilst we then seek to recruit the permanent staff into SENSAP.
Maria?
So why didn't we do that a year ago?
It's a very good question. You'll know that there's been a series of changes in terms of senior management in the service. You'll know that some of those senior managers have left without realistically a a sufficiently robust handover period. That meant that there has been some delays in absolute getting clarity as to what was requested and what was agreed. We then have reformulated what was needed by taking into account the views of service managers now, and obviously taking the view of the interim chief officer who was here and has recently left us. And then those matters have been in conversation with our trade union colleagues in terms of what's the best resource deployment model that was needed. All of that process has taken far too long. That process is now concluded, and the arrangements are now in place to get those people in as quickly as we possibly can.
I do appreciate all the changes that have happened, but the money for the Sensat workers was available in November 24, because we were told they'd be in place by February 25, and staff didn't change till November 25.
Maria is correct. There has been a delay. The delay is one that nobody would have wanted to have seen. We have worked through the delay. In terms of the resources that were put aside to it, those resources have been pivoted to other work. So that resource has been pivoted to increase the capacity for EPs. So what I said was that rather than just leave that money sat in the budget and not be spent, let's use that money to bring forward additional EP capacity that we wouldn't have had otherwise. So the resource has been deployed, and it is unfortunate that it has taken as long as it has done in terms of getting the Sensat resource in play. But as I say, all those matters are now finally concluded.
Thank you, Phil. I think you may not be happy with it. I'm sure you aren't, Maria, but I think he's answered the point. Thank you. Councillor Jenkins.
Thank you, Chair. This refers to paragraph 14 on page 39 about so Leeds had an area send inspection, CQC in Ofsted in June 2016, and therefore another area send inspection is due soon. So looking it up, I didn't know about these area inspections, but they're meant to happen every 5 years. So I imagine possibly it didn't happen because of COVID in 2021. But I just wondered if we could, for scrutiny's purposes in a way, have a look at that 2016 report and prepare ourselves in a way for 2026 when it may be we do have an inspection, and really to learn from the difficulties. I think if we'd had an inspection in 2021, it might have highlighted some of the issues that have arisen and the problems, but I mean most of them probably have happened because of the increase in ADHD and autism and neurodiversity issues that have arisen. So I think, can we just see if that, as part of scrutiny, look at that issue, please? Thank you.
Certainly will. Anyone at the bottom, Councillor Hayden?
Hi, thank you. Thank you, Chair. I'll bring Pete in because we have regular conversations with Ofsted. We have been preparing for a send inspection for 5 years, maybe. We also work really, really closely with the local authorities around us in the Yorkshire and the Humber. So every 3 months I have a meeting with my colleagues across the region, and they share what's happened with their inspections. You'd have to ask Ofsted as to why we didn't get one in 2021, and we are fully prepared for an inspection happening imminently. In terms of where we are now, it isn't where, and especially around the timeliness of EHCPs, that was a Leeds issue in terms of our funding for inclusion and our approach to that, rather than and EHCPs being for the most complex of children. That meant that money for send pupils got quickly into schools, but because of the legal framework nationally, we had to move to a model of more, and coupled with the rise in demand, then it meant that, and as Phil said, once an EHCP is out of timeliness, out of that 20-week, then it remains out of time. No matter whether it's like done in 22 weeks or 52 weeks, it's still out of time. So those reasons are complex. That's not to say that the work with our SEND children across schools in Leeds and our health partners happens day in, day out. And waiting for a plan does not mean that the support and education isn't happening. It is. It's extremely frustrating for families and schools not to have the plan, especially when a place is needed at a specific institution. But that's not to say that education isn't happening. It is, to very high qualities in many settings, and we will be but we are in constant conversations with Ofsted. It's not that they've left us alone for 10 years.
Thank you, Councillor Hayden. Please.
Thank you, Chair. So Councillor Hayden has correctly covered that the inspection framework. We do talk to Ofsted. Spoke to Ofsted last week. They don't tell us when they're coming, and that's quite right. But we should anticipate it very soon. I suppose the question is, we shouldn't be told anything by Ofsted or CQC that we don't already know ourselves, and therefore that leads us to the importance of ensuring that the governance, the partnership governance that Leeds has, is as robust as it possibly can be. So I think it's significant that we've now signalled that we're moving away from the partnership board, which had very many people around it, to something which is far smaller, far more focused, independently chaired by someone of great experience as a Department for Education Commissioner and as an advisor to the Department for Health and Social Care. That starts to give us a stronger governance platform, which will help us navigate not just inspection, but also the turnover in senior staff that you've referenced today. That, I think, Chair, is probably critical to this.
Thank you, Pete. Councillor Jenkins, would you like to come back?
No, that's fine, thank you.
Very much indeed. Helen.
Sorry, I'll start again. I wanted to come in on the early intervention during early years and to avoid the escalation of need, and obviously that is really welcome, and the individual support plans. I'm assuming, and correct me if I'm wrong, that the individual support plans will then go into schools for these children. And I'm just wondering how that will work in terms of workload, because having that plan for those children, as a teacher, you know that some children, you can avoid that escalation of need if there's the time and the effort and the people to put things in place. But I'm just wondering whether there will be money for, in order for the class teacher to come out of class, meet with the SENCO, and the time available for SENCOs as well, and whether there'll be more SENCO capacity in order to monitor these plans and monitor the progress and change the plans. So that's my question, really, if anybody knows an answer to that.
We have to await the detail, I think, is the honest answer. I think what the white paper sets out very clearly is a move to say that mainstream schools should have a greater focus on inclusion, and mainstream schools should be putting in place via individual support plans the arrangements that are able to support those children with those needs in those schools. The government has set out in the white paper that they expect a considerable amount of resource to flow through to that, both in terms of revenue support, which could be spent in terms of Senkos, could be spent in terms of other provision to help those needs, particularly at an early intervention focus. And there is some element of capital that might be available to support them. But exactly how the process will work, I think it is too early yet to say. But I think the white paper sets out very clearly that the role of schools will be strengthened significantly through the expected reforms, and I think that's reflected in the wording and sort of the explanations and descriptions of individual support plans.
Helen, do you want to come back? No. Okay, thanks very much. I have no more. Yeah. Oh, Councillor Downs, sorry.
I've just received an email this morning. Bearing in mind we're sort of looking at improving response times, etc. I'd just like to read out without identifying the person. I'm still no further forward. As you know, I'm complaining to Complaints Children about SENSAP being late, and the response from Complaints Children is now, ironically, a week late. Who do I complain to about Complaints Children? It's another faceless organisation that cannot be contacted. You need to wait 7 working days for an email response, and I've just phoned a number of times now. All lines are busy. Leave a message and we'll aim to respond to you within 2 working days. It's just hurdle after hurdle. I'm trying to get movement on what is a failing of the LA, and more barriers are going up to stop this happening. What is the escalation path for Complaints Children? Who manages them? And that's coming from a resident this morning who is exacerbated by the fact that they're just not getting any way forward.
Chair, first of all, we should apologise for the lack of a response in relation to the complaint. That is an unusual set of circumstances. Notwithstanding the challenges that SENSAP have and the delays that we acknowledge in SENSAP, our complaints handling process is very robust. So happily look into that. What I'd suggest, Councillor Downs, is if you send that email on to me, I can follow that through, and I'll make sure the response is picked up and forwarded off as soon as possible.
Do you want to come back, Councillor Downs? Are you okay?
Yeah, sadly it's not unique, the complaints, and it's a little bit better now, but it has been a fact that we are getting late responses from complaints as well. So it's just not unique at the moment.
I think it's pretty much accepted that timings have been less than satisfactory, to say the least. Indeed, I'm meeting with some of Ben's staff on Wednesday, I think, to discuss a slightly different issue, but they're all extremely important to the parents involved. I think that was the last comment or question I had, so if there is nothing else, I'll move on to the recommendations. Oh, I do apologise after what I said at the start. Right. The recommendations are to note and comment on the content of the report and appendices and make recommendations as deemed appropriate, and to note the coverage of the government white paper, Every Child Achieving and Thriving, contained within the report and its relevance to the ongoing improvement work on SEND services in Leeds. Could someone propose that for me, please? Councillor Gilani. Seconder? Councillor Rontry. All in favour? Any against? Any abstentions? All 3 again. Thank you very much indeed. Sorry, I've done it again. Item 9, the annual report on academic outcomes. Councillor Hayden, would you like to start off on this one?
Thank you, Chair. So the annual standards report covers academic outcomes data for 2025 and sets out the key trends across all phases. Nationally, outcomes have not returned to pre-pandemic levels, gaps are widening and attendance remains a significant issue. Leeds reflects many of those national trends. There have been rises in 8 out of 12 reported outcomes for Key Stage 2, including a 5-point rise in the percentage of children reaching the highest standard of reading and a 2-point rise in the percentage of pupils reaching the expected standard of reading, writing and maths. At Key Stage 4, outcomes have dipped, and we are working closely with school leaders to understand the drivers and target support where it is most needed. We are continuing to expand post-16 provision with FE's partners, and we are working with them to make sure the £10 million of capital investment strengthens capacity and improves the pathways available to young people. Early years remains our most urgent area for improvement, including the good level of development measure, or as its acronym is GLD, which I mentioned earlier. This is where the Best Start, National Best Start strategy aligns directly with our local strengths. As discussed, we are receiving dedicated government funding to improve GLD, and Leeds is in a strong position to deliver because of our long-standing commitment to early help and our established network of family hubs and children's centres. Our health visiting offer is being strengthened through wider review of the 0 to 19 service. This includes additional early years developmental checks and enhanced health visiting for families who need more support. These changes will mean earlier identification of need, clearer follow-up and stronger links with children's centres and family hubs, all of which are essential for improving school readiness and raising the good level of development. So there will be an extra contact and with families when the child is 3.5, which doesn't happen at the moment, and then, which I'm delighted about, school nurses will contact all families when their children turn into a teenager, which we know is a very difficult time in a family's life sometimes, and when families will need that support. So currently you don't actually get somebody from the health service contacting you once a child is in school, so that will be that will be a really fabulous addition. Leeds is well positioned to deliver this because we already have the infrastructure in place. Our family hubs, our children's centres, our Best Start and Beyond framework give us a strong foundation to build on. Despite the challenges, we are well placed to make progress. The national strategy, the new funding and our long-term early years commitment give us a real opportunity to shift outcomes for children and young people in Leeds. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Hayden. Councillor Goodall, did you want to come in at this stage or later? Okay. He came in very early there. Dave or Rebecca, were you picking this one up?
Thank you, Chair. Again, not many notes to add in addition to Councillor Hayden's opening comments. I think it's probably worth noting, though, that each year when we receive the academic outcomes, whilst we look to build on them year on year, there are cohort-specific circumstances that have an impact. So, for example, the children that completed their Key Stage 4 assessments in 2025, which this report is about, are the children who were in Year 6 during the COVID pandemic, and so they were the children that didn't necessarily have that great transition into Year 7, and we're seeing those outcomes that have been measured now at the end of Key Stage 4. So it's just worth noting that whilst we build and work with our schools on improving outcomes year on year, there are cohort-specific circumstances that also impact on those outcomes. Just also a note that around the timing of this information, obviously we're about to enter the next year's worth of assessments as we're going into GCSE and A-level time, as well as our SATs. And that the reason for the delay in the information is just the way that it's published by the DFE and that lag that we face. So that's why this is about the outcomes from last summer, from 2025.
Thank you, Rebecca. Dave, would you like to come in?
I think Rebecca covered the bits I was going to cover, Chair.
Thank you very much indeed. First one up is Councillor Goodall.
Thank you, Chair. Thanks for the report. I'll start with the positives. It's great to see some good results. For example, Key Stage 5 is great, and there are some positives in the other stages as well. Thanks to everyone concerned, everyone involved. The worries for me are both Key Stage 2 and Key Stage 4, where the gap between disadvantaged and non-disadvantaged is widening, and for some reason that seems to be worse in Leeds than it is nationally. And also, you've talked about early years. Again, that doesn't look good compared to last year or to, for example, the core cities. So, yes, COVID had an effect, but can you see any reasons why Leeds has that bigger gap, for example, between disadvantaged and non-disadvantaged than other areas, other comparative areas?
Thank you, Councillor Goodall. Which officer would like to take that one up?
Thanks, Councillor Goodall. Yeah, I think the disadvantage gap is always challenging in terms of identifying exactly where that's coming from. One thing I would probably identify is that there's a new national focus going on to the differences, particularly using the pupil premium funding. We've had discussions only last week with the DfE around a new early years targeted support project to look specifically at the use of pupil premium, early years pupil premium, with the cohort from April in Leeds, of how we utilise that pupil premium to reduce that gap that's evident. That will look at providing better data to settings, identifying key barriers to take up a pupil premium, how schools and settings utilise the pupil premium to good effect. And so I think it's recognised that there is that gap, and I think there's a renewed focus on reducing that gap.
Councillor Goodall? Okay. Councillor Stevenson.
Thanks, Chair. Dave sort of beat me to the point I was going to make there about pupil premium, and I think it'd be useful for us as a scrutiny board, as this conversation develops through the white paper and beyond, to try and have some input put into maybe the council's thinking on this as it responds as well. Pupil premium has been, you can argue, generally a good thing, but when you look at the stats, I think we've spent this right now. I think in 15 years we've spent annually around the GDP of Estonia on pupil premium, and the figures have remained stubbornly the same. Now, that's quite difficult because, of course, if you hadn't have spent that, what would this scenario be? But I do think there's probably a conversation cross-party to have about how best to utilise and target that money, and the white paper sort of opens that conversation up, and it'd be useful for scrutiny to have a role in that, and also for us to see how the data breaks down in different sections of the city. So you take the area I represent, for example, where you might have 3 or 4 disadvantaged pupils in a year. Well, if one of those pupils doesn't perform well, then that massively skews the figure because the cohort's so small. Whereas, some of the schools I work in the inner city, where you have a large amount of disadvantaged pupils, obviously, then those figures don't change as much when the cohort's bigger. And funny enough, that's where you get the best results, because you've got more bang for your buck as such. So it'd be useful to see a breakdown across the city in future, and for Scrutiny Board to be maybe a part of the conversation around a reassessment of pupil premium.
Thank you, Councillor Stevenson. 2 sort of separate issues there. Who'd like to pick up on those?
I can start, Chair. Schools have to account for how they spend the pupil premium money, but it is spent by schools on their pupils that qualify for that extra money because of disadvantage or SEND and a variety of other issues. So, yeah, I'm happy to have the conversation about what I think pupil premium money should be spent on, but in the end schools are inspected and have to account for how they spend that money and the outcomes that happen. It's not for me to say. I mean, education happens in schools, and I'm in terms of, if you look at, yes, which has dipped at Key Stage 4 levels, but what I failed to say in my opening remarks is just how much our Key Stage 4 young people achieve, and what an amazing job our primary and secondary schools do, and our young people in working hard. And I'm in a household with a daughter who is sitting her GCSEs, and I know just how difficult that is, both from a teaching perspective and now as a parent. So it's, I want to echo that, thanks. But and I'm happy to have the conversation that the white paper has opened up. But in terms of looking at how the pupil premium is used and what skews the facts, what works for certain pupils, what works in certain communities, it is down to the schools and how they progress it. But yeah.
Thank you, Councillor Hayden. Rebecca.
Thank you, Chair. In relation to the schools pupil premium, as Councillor Hayden's mentioned, it is something that schools are responsible for reporting on their use of. But we do have the role around the pupil premium plus, so the pupil premium allocated for children who are looked after, and how schools improve educational outcomes for those children through pupil premium plus. I think it's interesting to consider how we might be able to review or explore collectively how pupil premium is used across the city. I think because each individual school is required to report on that through their governing body, and it's their governors who are responsible for ensuring that accountability for the use of pupil premium, I think it'd be quite challenging for us to review that across all 280 schools. But obviously it's something for Scrutiny to consider how you might like to explore that.
Dave.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. I was just going to, on the back of me mentioning about the early years pupil premium plus and what Councillor Stevenson mentioned, we do need to have some conversations today. The DfE have approached us very late last week about taking part in a test and learn pupil premium early years project. I think as part of that, what Councillor Stevenson was saying around sort of looking in more depth at it, my understanding is part of the project, if we're involved, which would potentially bring more money for those early year settings, would be around some more in-depth look. So Scrutiny may have a really valuable role in terms of looking at as part of the project. So I think, but again, I need to share that with Councillor Hayden and Pete and Rebecca for more details, but we need to respond very quickly to them anyway.
Yes, thanks very much indeed, Dave. It was a fair question, I think, given that there doesn't appear to have been a huge improvement for the amount of money that's been spent. And I think it's certainly an area we can look at, certainly consider in the work programme later on. Do any other officers want to comment? There was the second element of the question about the data breakdown across the city. Anyone want to pick that one up?
Sorry, Chair. Would Councillor Stevenson, would you mind repeating that element of the question?
It was just, I don't know if you'll have that level actually, but it was just the point of, so in the outer areas of the city where the number of pupil premium children are fewer, and obviously a smaller cohort, one child improving alters it, skews it. So it's understanding in the different areas of the city what the gap between disadvantaged and advantaged is. Do we hold that data? Can we get it?
Yeah, thanks, Councillor Stevenson. I'll go back to the performance team and ask that question, whether we can break that down into the areas and the specific sort of ones that you mentioned.
Councillor Stevenson, okay? Yeah, okay. Helen.
On that progress of the or the lack of progress of children who would for schools would receive pupil premium money. I wonder how much there is actually available to meet those children's needs, because if you look at the pay awards and how they're not fully funded, they're rarely fully funded. You know, as a really experienced teacher, I know how much impact being able to run small groups for those children, to give them the time and more. You know, it's almost like when you have the guidelines for children with ESL. If children are coming to school disadvantaged, having the time for you to be able to verbalise what they need to do to learn, help them to understand. It happens through small group work, and I imagine that the lack of progress is probably through a general lack of money across the board. Because if you had that time, those children, whether they be on the outer part of the city where there are maybe fewer, or inner, I think that progress would be made for more children.
Anyone like to come back on that one? Pete?
Yeah, thank you. And I'll just make a general point, because that level of operational detail is obviously for decisions for schools to make, and schools working with their governors. But this is all relevant to where we started this meeting this morning, when we were talking about the spatial planning for schools, because ultimately, for more money to be in individual schools, we would expect that that balance between place planning, financial sustainability overall for schools, thinking about how need is met, the quality of the built environment for education as well, all of that does come together. So I think in some ways the point you're making is, whilst it's not for the council to be able to run schools, it does fit into that wider conversation that we've already had.
Helen, okay. All right. Any more questions or comments? Okay, if we can move on to the recommendations then. Recommendations are to note the performance against headline measures for pupils in comparison with national data, and to utilise the data narrative to identify outcome areas for future scrutiny throughout the municipal year. Could someone propose that? Councillor Wilson. Second? Councillor Gamani. All in favour? Any against? Any abstentions? All in favour. That's carried. Just as a matter of interest on the on sort of taking this forward, I understand how difficult it is, because of course you're working on data that's months and months and months old, but in the interim period there's presumably work going on to improve what's happening in schools, etc. It might be useful, Rob, to consider this for a future scrutiny board meeting, just to see how things are progressing in terms of how we're trying to bring up the areas where we're not as good as other schools, either locally or nationally, just to give us an idea in advance of the actual results, which come in so much later and all the rest of it. Part of scrutiny is to try and affect positively policy, etc., and it would be nice to think that the key element really of bringing children up from a educational point of view is what happens in school. So perhaps it's something you can bring back at a future date. So thank you. Right. Moving on to item number 10, which is the end of year scrutiny board statement, a copy of which you will all have had. There is a minor error on page 104, which refers to the month headings as February, March, as opposed to March, April. Rob's going to cover this item and he'll come in more detail. Rob.
Yes, thanks, Chair. Yes, I will amend that very minor error. Yes, as you pointed out. Thank you. So this is, in general terms, linked to the annual report that Scrutiny does each year, which is considered by the full council meeting in July. The document does become published, so the recommendations are to seek approval of the board for that, subject to any comments made at today's meeting. Yes, and it just highlights the work programme of the board and summarises what we've done for the over the municipal year, with a statement from the chair to support that, with ultimately more detail to come in the annual report, which follows later in the year. Thank you, Chair.
Thanks very much, Rob. Looking at the end of year report or statement of the Scrutiny Board, and subject to the amendment that Rob has already mentioned, could someone propose we put this one forward? Councillor Renshaw. Anyone seconded? Thank you. All in favour? Any against? Any abstentions? Carried unanimously. Moving on to number 11, which is the work programme. We discussed this in the pre-meeting. Essentially, unless anybody's got anything to add to this at the moment, we'll move straight on to the recommendation. Does anyone have any comments or questions about the work programme as projected? Please.
Thanks, Chair. I just wanted to revert back to the safeguarding point that we had on there. I attended a VIU event that West Yorkshire Combined Authority held in Halifax last week, and it was noted that there are significant county line issues and knife and gang crime within Leeds that professionals and colleagues in Leeds shared. So I just wondered if we could kind of bring that back onto the work plan.
Anyone like to comment on that?
Thank you, Chair. We through our Youth Justice Partnership and in collaboration with partners in the police and West Yorkshire's office, are working, as you'd imagine, to address those issues. I think it's fair to say that Leeds, like all of the cities and towns in West Yorkshire, has a range of challenges in terms of young people's behaviour. If Scrutiny wanted to take a deeper dive into those issues, we could obviously support with information if was needed.
Thanks, Ben. Is that okay? Right, thanks very much indeed. Moving on to the recommendations then, members are asked to note the draft 25-26 work programme, what's left of it that is, for the Scrutiny Board. Can someone propose that, please? Councillor Wilson. Seconder? Councillor Renshaw. All in favour? Any against? Any abstentions? All accepted. Thank you very much indeed. So just on to the date and time of the next meeting, which is in the new municipal year, subject to the agreement of the annual general meeting, the council, etc. Meeting will take place on the 10th of June. Well, a pre-meeting for board meetings at 1:15. Quite a significant happening between now and then, of course. I do hope that everybody's here will be here next year, no matter what party they're in. I shouldn't really say that, I suppose, but it'd be nice to see the same faces. Councillor Hayden.
Councillor Renshaw is retiring, so she won't be here, but for very positive reasons. And just, I'd like to say, because you've reminded me there, all the many, many years of hard work that Karen has put into children's generally, but specifically on this board. I just want to recognise that. And over my 11 years on the council, she's been a real kind of mentor and, someone to go to when I needed advice. And I'm going to miss you. And thank you so much, Councillor Renshaw, for your many, many years of commitment to our children, and both professionally and as a councillor as well. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Councillor Hayden. It's always a very difficult one at the end of the year, because some people want to go and some people don't want to go, and it's difficult to know whether to mention it or not. I knew that Karen was going this year, and I was hoping that someone would bring it up, so I'm absolutely delighted that you did, Helen. From a purely personal point of view, I've known Karen for many, many years. I think we've become fairly good political friends and all the rest of it. And I think someone said before the meeting started today, they can't remember when she actually came on the board, which I suppose is a compliment in itself. So certainly from my perspective as well, Karen, and for everybody else here, the very best of luck with whatever you decide to do next. And thank you for all your contributions to the board over the years and to the council in general. Okay. Helen, do you want to come back in?
Yeah, what I also failed to recognise is this is Phil's last.
I was just going to move on to that.
Oh, you're going to move on to that. Great, fantastic. Yeah, and I'm pleased to say that his wife has won that particular battle.
Yeah, I was going to leave the best to the last. Phil, yeah, I know it's been very recent when you decided to go, and we know the reasons why you decided to go. But again, from a purely personal point of view, although I haven't met you much before the last sort of few months or so, I've made the comment to Pete and to various other people of how much I've appreciated what a straight-talking guy you are. You ask a question, you get the answer, not necessarily the one you want, but it's certainly an answer, and it's something I've always wanted in any kind of position, from being a politician to originally being a civil servant. When you ask a question, you really want to know what the person thinks, not what they think you want to hear. So again, from a purely personal perspective, very best of luck. Thank you for all your help and guidance and all the rest of it. And if you'd like to say a few words, please feel welcome. If you don't, equally feel welcome.
Taking me rather by surprise, probably the only thing I'd probably want to say.
Once again, thank everybody for turning up today and for the whole year so far. It's been an absolute pleasure to be in chair of the meeting of the Scrutiny Board. I've no idea whether I'll be chair of it next year or not. Those things are decided at much higher pay level than me. But I'd like to thank you all, individual members, officers and politicians, in particular Councillor Hayden, who's attended every meeting, and all the officers who've turned up, and all the various sort of guests we've had over the year. Without you, there just wouldn't be a Scrutiny Board. So thank you all very much indeed, and I hope I will see you next year, whether I'm sitting over there, whether I'm sitting here, or whether I'm nowhere to be seen. All right, thank you.